Welcome to Engineering Influence, the podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. And today we're continuing our conversations with HDR, this time on employee experience and talent development. And to discuss this, I'm very pleased to be joined by Katie Duty. Katie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's kick this off by really the definition that HDR uses when it talks about employee experience and talent development, because everybody kind of has their own way of looking at things. How in your mind does HDR approach this subject?
Well, employee experience is really about everything our employees connect with at HDR, how they connect to each other, how they connect to the work we're doing in our communities. And so talent development is not a one size fits all. We don't have just a series of 2 or 3 programs that say, if you want to be in this role, you do this training. It's really about creating experiences that are employee led. So we have a learning and organizational development program within HDR. We have mentoring. We have very structured and facilitated development programs. We have very informal, organic development that happens. And all of that's really driven out of our employee ownership culture. It's a very people first culture because of that employee ownership. And so it means developing employees no matter where you are in your career, no matter what your profession might be. And so it's weaving everything throughout their day-to-day life at HDR, helping people find their own sense of purpose and their own development path.
Yeah, we had a conversation about the employee ownership not too long ago. And the model really does give everyone a feeling of joint ownership, that the project isn't just a project that is being done. You know, it's something that the engineers feel invested in because of the model where, the employees have that ownership stake and they feel connected to the project.
It means that our employees want to work together collectively as opposed to getting a checklist accomplished or each taking care of their own piece of the project. Collectively, everybody sort of leans in and solves problems together.
And that also extends to projects that cross boundaries of jurisdiction, that since everybody kind of is in the same spot, it's not a question of one office or one region working with another region. It's not really viewed that way as much as it is an entire HDR approach.
I think it goes another step further beyond just potential geography boundaries. It's also really different kinds of service lines. So we're a full service AE. We primarily work for public sector clients, but we work for lots of different clients with infrastructure needs. And so it's not just, well, our water group solves these problems and our transportation program solves these problems. We really work together across all of the different potential silos or potential tracks of engineering, whether it's geography based or whether it's just the different kind of work, bringing the right people together to solve problems.
Out of the programs that you mentioned in that list, is there one or a couple that you feel really differentiate HDR in the engineering marketplace?
Well, I think as far as our development programs, it's really our overall approach to development that I think differentiates us. So there are lots of firms that can provide the technical or creative solutions we provide. There are lots of firms that have development for their staff, whether they create it internally or maybe they have a partnership with a vendor. Our approach is back to this really holistic, people oriented. And so providing lots of different ways for people to find development. We have what we call a career ecosystem or a talent ecosystem where people can find out where they are today, really sit down and talk with a supervisor about where they'd like to go and what they want to do. I've been at HDR over 20 years, and part of how I've been able to stay here is really because I've had opportunities to do lots of different things. And that's really at the core of the culture of what HDR does. We support and develop people. If it means you change directions on what you're learning to do or your interests or your passions, there's support to do that. And again, back to this employee driven, where there are programs there are online webinars you can sign up for. There are in-person led curriculum development. The other thing is we take both the technical training to heart as far as making sure we have top quality technical training for our staff. The other is really the other pieces. We all have to work with people, whether it's on teams, whether it's with our clients, and really having those softer skills of how to communicate effectively, how to resolve conflicts, how to have emotional intelligence, how to navigate delivering work across boundaries, geographies, like you talked about. We have trainings that support all of it as opposed to one particular piece of developing our
That's
staff.
critically important. I mean, you could have someone graduating from a top-notch engineering program, and they have a really good uh, grasp and understanding of the technical skill, but there's an entire side of the actual business of engineering that is not taught, which is the running a business, running a project. And then also, I think there's something that we like to talk a lot more about, trying to attract more people into the industry, that it's not just numbers and it's not just hard numbers and hard science. There's also a lot of soft skills required. There's a lot of interaction with people, and I would imagine at HDR with such a breadth of public clients, I mean, you're talking about municipal boards, you're talking about everything from the local all the way up to federal level, where you have to get community buy-in, stakeholder engagement, and the like. Yeah, how does you mentioned that, I mean, that those soft skills of talking to people and conflict resolution, how does HDR approach that with its younger talent, of getting them in front of people and getting them comfortable to be able to go to, let's say, a zoning board or a town meeting and be able to justify or explain the value of a project that the firm is working on?
You're absolutely right. In school as engineers, we do a lot of mathematical and scientific problem solving, but the real problem solving comes in being able to communicate and connect with people who are going to benefit or be impacted by a project. And if you can't explain it in a way that everybody can understand, the project goes nowhere and it ends up being unsuccessful. And so some of the ways we do that, we have employee network groups at HDR. One of them is our young professionals group, which we started about 15 years ago. And it's open to all of our younger staff. So you don't have to be an engineer or an architect necessarily. It's open to everybody who's earlier in their career and maybe is looking to learn about what we do and how we do it and build their own network. So there are learning opportunities through our employee network groups like Young Professionals. We also do a lot of very intentional organic mentoring where you take young staff intentionally to a meeting with a client, you take them out to a site visit, you take them to projects. There's a lot of conversation about how to make sure you're exposing people to the different things that we do in our day-to-day project delivery that you won't get from reading a textbook or you might not get from sitting in a lecture hall at a university. And so after you get young staff introduced to sort of the range of things they might do. Sitting down and really developing an individual development plan with our employees is an important conversation we have as well. Really thinking about the things that the employees excelling in and really enjoys, thinking about things that if they want to get to another step, another role, what are some of the learning that they need to do, and then finding the opportunity to do it, whether it exists in cohort learning at HDR, whether it exists in programs that they can join, or it, again, is back to just that organic kind of informal mentoring that happens as you go through your project work.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I've talked to a lot of engineers who were working on um, greenway and trails projects for North Carolina. We were in North Carolina for a great trails conference, and it was talked to a lot of engineers who actually were working on these projects, but in no way were they even thinking about working in these areas before.
Mm-hmm.
That they started off thinking they were going to be doing civil, and even those kind of a branch of civil, that they never really thought that they would be focusing in on, let's say, you know designing or engineering parks or trails and things of that nature. And it seems like you graduate from school, you kind of have an idea of what you want to do, but it's not until you're actually working in that area and you get exposed to these different fields that you kind of find your niche. So having that ability to identify opportunities early in your career to see where you might want to stretch into, and having a firm that supports that or encourages that is a big benefit for, I would imagine, employee retention.
And we'd much rather have employees find a slightly different career path at HDR. Maybe they were hired to work on one particular area of our business and they find a passion in something else. We'd much rather them stay at HDR and work on that different kind of project or that different expertise building, then leave entirely and think that that's the only way they get to do something different. Like I mentioned, I've had the chance to do lots of different things at HDR. And so, I think I'm an example of that, but we live that every single day, helping people find different ways. You find your passion once you sort of get into projects, and you might think you want to go down one path, and you try it out and realize there's something else that's very different. The other thing is really a recognition that our industry is changing. The future of our industry is going to be different than it is today. And really making sure we're approaching solving problems with open minds, leveraging the tools we have, but having our people ready to be nimble and adjust is really important as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point because that is the big transformation happening within our industry, especially as it relates to technology and how AI and digital tools are really transforming the way that projects are not only delivered but also managed and conceived. How is HDR kind of leaning forward in that respect to looking at what the firm of the future might actually evolve into, and how is HDR kind of positioning itself to help employees grow or identify even new areas where employees might be able to grow into, especially with AI or emerging tech?
Yeah, so a few different ways. One is really just first recognizing that it is going to be different. We are in a changing technology environment that's really going to affect the outcome of how we deliver work and what solutions we provide. And the reality is there will be AI and computer programs that can do more of the engineering and the science that today a lot of people do. We still use a lot of tools and models and technology to help us design, but really having those people who can work with others, that those people skills, the creative solutions, the really understanding complex problems. One of the things about HDR is we have strategic communications professionals, we have data analysts, we have advisory services, we look at changing regulations. By looking at the whole picture and having our project teams talk about the whole picture of the challenge as opposed to solving one engineering situation really helps us think about where we might be in the future. And so the way we execute projects, the way we approach projects, it's looking at it on a much bigger scale than just taking care of one simple task right in front of us.
That's a really interesting point because, and I think for anyone out there watching, and especially those engineers or future engineers or people who are in college and trying to figure out what to do, engineering is a great field. If you are not just, you don't have to be an engineer, right? Especially if a firm like HDR is a full service provider, you're not just looking at you're looking at the economics of a project. You're looking at how to communicate that or do that from a communications perspective, the marketing of it. It's such a full service firm that it's not just specifically, yes, engineering, architecture, absolutely, AE, that comes first, but there's a lot else that goes into the work to support that. How does HDR try to get out there and maybe get market itself to maybe these professionals who might not be engineers or people who may not have the ability to at one point license and sign a
Yeah,
document.
you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things with my new role in the organization, really focusing on all of the different skill sets and professionals that we need to have to solve communities' problems. That's really what we're trying to do is we're problem solvers, but how we go about doing it, whether we have a full team of engineers, whether we have some engineers and a whole suite of other professionals, it's really recognizing all of those skill sets and capabilities need to exist to provide those kind of solutions, finding development paths for all of those different professionals. So yes, we have lots of engineers and lots of architects, but we need lots of others in order to solve those problems. So recognizing it, and then really as we're looking at recruiting, bringing in internships, looking at the future of our workforce, it's looking at lots of different backgrounds and really recruiting from people who are just motivated to solve problems, to work collaboratively, and finding a range of skill sets that might help us fill out a team to do that. When we go out into schools, really talking, one of the things I do when I go and talk to students, K through 12 students about engineering, I don't talk about, do you really love to do hard math and science? I really talk about, do you like helping people? Do you like solving problems? And it helps them get excited about it. And then they might find their own path within it. It doesn't have to be engineering or architecture necessarily.
That's the message that I think we have to get better at as an industry.
Absolutely.
It's just not the math and science. It is, you really expressed it. Engineers are problem solvers. Engineering firms exist to make things better, to take a challenge, to improve something, to fix something that's broken. It's one of those few career paths where the end result is a net positive, right? There's
Mhm.
not much controversy on improving things, and getting that out front, I think, is critically important. We just recently launched with our colleagues at APWA, the Public Works Association, and the American Society of Civil Engineers, a engineering workforce consortium, bringing in industry, we're bringing in academia, we're bringing in public and private clients. We're trying to get everybody together to try to figure out the workforce challenge. And I think for anybody interested in that, what you just said there about getting into schools, talking to students about the non-technical
Mhm.
aspects of the industry is critically important to get more people to choose this field of engineering.
And I think that there are other aspects of whether it's different tools and technology we can support, getting into K through 12 to get people interested. Also, HDR is partnering with some colleges to develop BIM and GIS programs that really help solve today's challenges, and really partnering real world problems with what students are learning in school in hands-on ways. Is really helping people see what they might do right away while they're learning something that they might be just a little bit interested in to start with.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a lot. It sounds like HDR, you're ahead of the curve a lot of the time. I encourage other members to listen in and think about this, because it's talent development. We're in a talent crunch. We're in a workforce crunch. We don't have enough engineers. People are graduating and they're not coming into our area. They're going into other areas of engineering, and we need to try to expand the tent. And it looks like HDR is very active in doing that. So, well, we appreciate that from ACEC's perspective. So hopefully we can get more people into the industry.
And we feel it's part of our responsibility to help do that, to partner across the industry, to help bring people into, again, solving our community's problems. There are not enough people to solve all the challenges we have out there. And so how do we think more creatively? How are we more effective? But how do we get more people excited about it as well is really important.
Well, Katie, I really do appreciate you taking the time today to talk about this. It's a great topic. I think it's a great preview into what HDR is doing for talent development, retention, and encouraging the next generation to join the industry, and especially over at HDR. And I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you.
Fantastic. And again, this has been Engineering Influence, a podcast for the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we'll see you next time.